Welcome to another episode of Your Space with your host, Hannah Arinite. Once again, we are here giving the young people an opportunity to express their thoughts and views. Now, with me in studio today is a very interesting group that is passionate about climate change, anything environmental related, and I'm excited that Your Space is finally taking an opportunity in this direction and angle. I'm going to allow my team to introduce themselves, starting from here. Hello and welcome to Your Space. How has your week been?
My week has been so interesting, Hannah, and I'm glad to be here. My name is Irene Tonjire. I'm a community mobilizer and organizer, and I'm the executive director, Women for Green Economy Movement Uganda. It's a community-based organization that deals in empowering marginalized women, girls, and youth to raise their voices in fighting for climate justice and gender justice. And we basically deal with marginalized women at grassroots to empower them to know their environmental and land rights. And knowing your right, it means you are going to fight and defend your right and live in harmony, with the community and at the same time with the country at large.
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you for doing what you do. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here with us on Your Space.
Thank you, Hannah. My name is Howard Mwesigwa, and I have the privilege of wearing a number of hats. But one of them, I'm the Speaker of the National Environment Parliament, but also the Chairperson of the European Union Youth Sounding Board, and also the Team Leader for Energy, Environment and Sustainability at Kaligumtima and Company. I'm profoundly delighted to be joining you today, Hannah. It's been a minute since we last did this together, so thank you for inviting me. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us. Hello, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Hannah, for hosting me. My name is Childern. I'm the Programs Officer, Women for Green Economy Uganda, a youth activist, a human rights defender, and a writer. I'm privileged to be here today.
Yeah, I'm actually quite excited with my panel today. They are people that have all the experience, the knowledge to give us insight into today's conversation, that is intersectional feminism in climate finance. One of the challenges that we have when we're having conversations around climate is truly understanding what some of these big words and big terms mean. So I'll start with you, Irene. What do you, in the simplest possible terms, how would you describe intersectional feminism in the climate finance space?
Intersectional feminism, to my understanding and in my own opinion, I feel like it's bridging the gap to bring equity in the community, not leaving anyone behind, for people, either the elderly, the women, the men, to know their rights and to be able or to be in position to fight and defend their rights, knowing that we are in these patriarchal systems, we are in these power imbalances, but you find that you have the voice, to raise it, to get what you want. In my opinion, that is what feminism means, or feminist, being a feminist, what it means. And when we talk about climate finance, it means that we are in a dilemma of climate crisis, and we can't solve that without climate finance. So what we do is we bring in communities, women, men, youth, girls, to start up these innovations to bring or to increase on climate finance from grassroots. We cannot wait for the promises that are coming from global north countries, we cannot wait for that because it is going to be too late for us. So we make sure that we provide them with knowledge, ideas, skills on how to start up environmental friendly businesses for environmental protection, and at the same time to bring finances from grassroots that are increasing on climate adaptation and mitigation.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Howard, I know you've been on so many local platforms internationally as well. Do you think that the climate financing in regards to intersectional feminism has done justice, especially to the age range of women and children?
Well, that's a great question, and it's broad in the sense that at the time when we were having the citizens, the environment parliament this year, one of the major components there actually in the compact that we have is intersectional feminism and climate finance, looking at bridging that gap, through looking at climate finance basically through feminist lenses. And as you know, Hannah and fellow panelists, the question of climate finance has been a very contentious issue. Actually, this year, just a few weeks back, we had COP29 happening in Baku in Azerbaijan, and we thought this would be the finance COP. And we had hoped, of course, the work being led by the least developed countries, advocating for a tune of about 1.3 trillion US dollars in climate finance. But when you look at, and that is in terms of the new collective quantified goal on climate finance, the NCQG as we know it. But what happened in the final text, actually, in the pre-text, which had about 200 billion US dollars, the final text had about 350, actually 300 billion US dollars to 2035. That is the time that we have to get that match. And so there are already inequalities at that level because, of course, the principle is the polluter pays, but also the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and capabilities. That is why we are saying, okay, the global north countries need to pay up for the pollution. Of course, as we see, the pollution that is affecting, of course, with the global, the greenhouse gases as well, how that is affecting global south countries that are at the very forefront of the climate crisis. You see, so that challenge has been that even before we look at it from feminist lenses, global south countries are not getting the money they need to support their national determined contributions. And now we're getting into NDC 3.0, which we must submit next year by Feb. And so we have deadlines that we must comply with. In the meantime, we're already experiencing the adverse effects of climate change. As you know, in Uganda, there are floods almost everywhere. And of course, in the north, we've been having the drought spell. We have landslides, we have mudslides, we have garbage slides, we have all sorts of climate-related disasters. You can imagine. Yes. So for us to fund our adaptation needs, we need that climate finance now. And the challenge, of course, has been that the need is not being met by what is being provided. And that is even worse when it comes to the question of women, for example, and the work that has been done by the Lima Work Program on gender, but also the Gender Action Plan as well, that looks at mainstreaming gender in the climate conversation, to see the role, to acknowledge the role of women, not just as caregivers, but also as champions and vagants for change at the community level. So we see that even then, climate change and the finance that we're talking about, it has sort of the need to bridge that gap. There's money that needs to be invested in that regard of, mainstreaming the place of women in not only the discussion. Of course, we know historically they've been marginalized.
I just need to find out why it is so important that we have this money stewarded towards that direction. Why is it that it's important for us to specify with that demographic? I think that's one of the biggest questions I have. What makes it so different focusing there versus focusing on just the entire demographic, male, female, and
No, I think the imperative behind that need is from the recognition of the fact that climate change affects all of us, but it affects certain demographic groups more disproportionately. And when you look at the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the report released in light of, in the sixth cycle, which is the 2023 report, it takes note of the fact that women and in extension children are affected more disproportionately by climate change and the related disasters. Yes, so that is where the need really comes from, to be able to divert much of the finance in that regard, to be able to build the capacity of women with the knowledge, with the skills, but also to ensure that we empower them to participate meaningfully in the crafting of some of these policies and solutions.
That's quite interesting. Shalon, I know that you are a girl champion. You're somebody who leads from that perspective. I would like to find out what you think your role of women leaders and activists is in ensuring that there is transparency in climate financing, especially from the demographic we are having conversation around, the feminist perspective?
Okay, thank you, Hannah, for the question. And of course, if I can come to the question directly on what you've asked, as a role and being a girl champion, of course it is to empower and sensitize other girls in the community or women to come and take on the climate action. So we've seen most people are affected, especially the girls and women. They're affected by climate change, but they do not know what to do. So we have to teach them on how to be resilient, climate resilient. So in so doing, they will cope up, because we've also seen that when these climate changes or the weather events like floods, like drought, they affect these girls and young women. For example, during the menstruation hygiene management.
During the menstruation hygiene management. Okay.
Yes, so if at all maybe the drought has hit, these girls have to travel long distances looking for water to clean
Does
themselves.
this actively happen in Uganda? Because I know there's some people who are going to be very skeptical about this. We've seen a number of activists that give certain examples. Some people can't even relate to such situations. Does that actually happen in Uganda, that ladies have to travel like really long distances to find water and all these different things?
Exactly, it happens, because we've seen this. We also saw last time where we saw that even women in some areas, they are using cow dung as their...
Which areas are those? This is true, Irene. You've had research in regards to this?
Yeah, most especially in the communities in the Albert and Graben. We recently carried out a workshop on feminist ecofeminism workshop, and where women were really in depression. Women were really so hurting to the extent that girls have been raped while fetching water. And you know, Albert and Graben is this...
Which part is the Albert and...
Hoima district.
Hoima.
And we basically went into villages of Kijumba, Chakatemba, Chakaboga, where oil is being extracted. You know, so this brings, and Uganda having being the country with this East African crude oil pipeline, I expect those communities to be improved, you know, to have enough water, enough schools, enough health centers. But to my disappointment, I found out that even women, girls, no longer go to school, because by the time they come from fetching water, collecting firewood to help the mother at home or the grandmother at home, it's already late. You know, so there is high level of school dropouts. And all this, you see, it brings about by climate crisis, drought. The rivers where they have been fetching water are getting dry, you know. And then maybe talking to how Howard talked about the COP in Baku. This was supposed to be a climate COP. It was supposed to be a finance COP, I mean, but then you find that they didn't come out with any decisions on how communities are going to access the finances for climate adaptation and mitigation, you know. And then it's been years since COP started, since COP 1, I mean, like in 1990 something. But up to now, we are still discussing the same conversations.
Yeah.
So we as activists, what can we do that we come up with solutions? Because communities are crying, women are dying here and there. Impacts are like in Bulambuli, what happened? People, young innocent souls, you know, they died. But then I feel like we shouldn't majorly focus on policies, you know. Yes, as big organizations as the negotiators, African negotiators, are pushing for policies, are pushing for deliberations. What are we doing on ground?
What are we doing on ground? I think that should be our next point of conversations when we come back. Keep it tuned right here on Your Space. Welcome back from that brief break. You are still on Your Space with your host, Hannah Arinita. We are still here with a very interesting panel having conversations around intersectional feminism, how it plays even with things aligning with transparency, accountability. And one of the things that I think is very key moving forward is to see how somebody who is watching, right, can be able to take this into action within their powers. You talked about solutions at a certain point. What are some of these solutions you think were not covered but need to be covered? And do you think that's possible, especially within our local setting in Uganda?
Yeah, it is very possible. And it is very possible if we have accountability and transparency in the release of funds for climate. You know, we believe that there are so many finances coming into climate, but the question is, how can we be ably access them? You know, that's the question. And majorly what we are doing, the solution that Women for Green Economy is doing is we are making sure that we train women to start saving groups. We train women to start weaving eco-friendly bags, not only for plastic, control in the environment aspect or for climate adaptation aspect, but also for their economic empowerment. We cannot beat this elephant in the room, the climate crisis, without finance.
That's true. And I think I'll come to you, Childern, in particular. How do you think women groups and women can be able to collaborate with organizations when it comes to imparting this knowledge on climate finance, and especially with the women?
Thank you, Hannah, and thank you, the fellow panelists. To come back to the question, I would say that those women groups should also reach out to the organizations, because we've got these organizations.
Like which ones? Because I think there's somebody watching and they're thinking, which organizations are these guys speaking about?
Of course, if I can speak from the informed point of view, WOGEM is on the grassroots in Hoima district.
WOGEM in full is
Women for Green Economy Movement Uganda. So those women groups can reach out to us right now as I speak when they get issues with climate change or other issues, because we've seen that climate change has brought a lot of issues in communities, like GBV cases. So these women in Kijumba, Chakatenga, they do reach out to us and we give them the solutions, the simple solutions.
Howard, I would like us to now explore some of those inclusive financing models that you think can be able to involve women and children.
Okay, so inclusive finance models, I think picking from the earlier conversation on accessibility, it's a major component because it's one thing to have the funds available.
True.
It's another to have them, access, by, those that actually do need the finance. And as you know, for example, right now we have the Climate Finance Unit, which was created in the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. But of course, drawing all the way, because even at the international level, I've had the opportunity of being part of the conversation at a global level, and many global South countries are, complaining. Imagine countries, nations, sovereign nations are complaining that even them, they are not able to access this finance. For example, under the UNFCCC, which is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, there's a creation of the Green Climate Fund, for example, but also the extension of the Global Environment Facility, which is the GCF and the GEF. And of course, subsequently, we've been having discussions on the Adaptation Fund, on the Loss and Damage Fund, and now, of course, we're talking about the new collective quantified goal. And when you asked the question earlier on, what are those points, some of those that were missed out? For example, in the text of the NCQG, it was, a robust framework that indicates how this money is going to be accessed, right? So you find that you commit to replenishing a fund, but you do not streamline the process of this is what you need to do to access it, right? So one of the success stories I've seen, for example, some of the work that we do with development partners here, recently the Royal Embassy of Denmark made a call for applications, and there was, I think, I'm not so sure about the quantum, but it should be maybe about 100,000 US dollars, with special emphasis on women-led groups and youth-led groups. And there were so many categories on the green economy, on civic engagement, but also on skilling and employment. So I think sometimes when we disaggregate this data and we take cognizance of some of the structural limitations of some of these groups, and we break down some of the requirements, for example, for the youth, if you're going to look for a youth organization that has 10 years experience, that has all these reports and it's hard, yes,
really hard.
So you can avail the money, but you make it so difficult, yes, for it to be accessed, right? And that is self-defeatist. So I think one of the models that I think we've also seen here in Uganda is the GROW project, for example. If you guys have heard about the GROW project, which is being managed by the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Community Development, but also with tremendous support from the World Bank and partners as well. I think the Private Sector Foundation for Uganda is also one of the partners on the implementing end, where the interest rate on some of these loans has been cut, I think, to about 10% actually, or even less. And for women that are actually, undertaking enterprises, but they are women with disabilities. When they return this money, they give it back to them with the interest of 10%, you can imagine. So I think some of these models need to take into cognizance some of the realities, the lived experiences of the beneficiaries to make them more accessible, but also to make sure that they're able to, be able to address the actual needs and aspirations of the intended beneficiaries.
I see Irene is burning to say something in regards to this.
I'm actually burning on that GROW project. I personally, I tried to reach out to partners, the banks that are actually giving out these loans, because the women that we work with had this idea, like, we need this money, but it was such a disappointment. I don't know, there is in the area of corruption within. This money is being given to people who they know, and another challenge was that the accessibility was also not directly to women. Okay, reading, you find that yes, this is the money. Or hearing what Howard has explained, you feel like, wow, this GROW project
was meant for us.
It is meant for women, especially women in business, But it's very, very difficult, because I personally have experience. I've reached out to different people. And why did I intend to reach out? Because I have women from grassroots who really believes in me that I can, do something.
Actually, I think when they look at you, they see somebody who at least is a little bit privileged in that area. So I would expect it to be easier for you.
Exactly. And I tried to explain, see, I'm working with over 100 women. They have these small businesses that they need to invest into. It was so hard on me. And I said, okay, with or without, I have to support women that I work with to build themselves, to reduce gender-based violence in communities, with the little support we get from funders, donors, who are really interested in the livelihood programs that we are doing.
Please.
Yeah, and maybe talking about, in line with climate financing, how Howard had talked about the loss and damage fund, which was operationalized in COP 2028. But up to now, how many organizations have really been able to access that fund? But it is still being discussed. My question still stands. What can we do as women at grassroots, as youth? What can we do to access the money that we are seeing? Everyone, when you talk about that you're working with the women and in line with climate finance, climate change, people say there is money.
Where is the money?
Where is the money? We need to see that. We need to see that money. Where is the money that community-based organizations actually can be in position to get the flexible funding to support marginalized women that are being affected by the climate crisis, that are being affected by the fossil fuels, because all these big projects are affecting women who are unable to speak. But we, being privileged as the panel, we are asking the government, where is the money and how can we access those monies to support communities from the grassroots?
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. I really do hope that we'll be getting answers to that. Now, unfortunately, our time is fast spent, but I will start with you, Childern. How best do you think we can be able to move forward? What final advice could you be giving to another female climate champion that is watching you right now to keep moving forward?
Thank you, Hannah. I would like to say and tell my fellow climate activists that if we can put much more efforts in amplifying the voices of other youth who are still at the grassroots and they do not have a chance to, like this chance to come here and speak. So I would like to say that we can use the few spaces, the available spaces, to amplify their voices. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Childern. Howard, how would you want this conversation to end? How can somebody on the other side be able to take something home? What would it be if they take something home?
Many thanks indeed, Hannah, for the opportunity to join colleagues on this very important discussion. I think for me, the take home is that much of the discussion is happening at the global level, but we need to have that conversation cascade to the domestic, to the local level, to the grassroots in these communities, many of which are at the very forefront of the climate crisis. So my plea will be to the development partners, some of whom I have the pleasure of working with, but also to government and international organizations, is to the local communities, to the rural farmers, to the women and the young people who are at the grassroots level, who are at the very forefront of the climate crisis, to ensure that it's accessible and we're able to direct that money to where it's needed the most, especially in many of these local communities that are at the forefront of the climate crisis.
Definitely. I read in just a couple of few words, how would you like this conversation to end?
I encourage the youth and the women to be creative and innovative, because they are ideas, the indigenous that we have, we can use it to increase on climate adaptation and mitigation. And again, we should not depend, yes, the global north has to pay for the loss and damages that they caused in our communities. But we as Africans, or we as Ugandans, we should not depend on it. You know, let's be doing something on ground, like how Wagem has empowered over 100 women to start creating or weaving eco-friendly bags, you know, for environmental protection and at the same time for economic empowerment, to create that gender equality in the communities. So let's be doing on ground as we wait. Yeah, let's be creative, innovative as we wait for the global north or development partners to pay for their loss and damages in our communities. And let's amplify our voices. Let's document what we are doing as activists to know that it's indeed real that climate crisis is affecting global north countries. Let's not be silenced.
Okay.
Thank you.
I know this conversation is going to be shaking a couple of tables. Let the conversation continue on our Twitter page at Your Space Uganda. I'll see you again next Sunday. Bye-bye.